Hello and welcome back to the Hive. And this week I'm really pleased to have back Sarah Brewster as our guest panellist. Some of you will remember that Sarah joined us when we were talking about mental health and wellbeing during Mental Health Awareness Week, what seems like a lifetime ago, back in the early period of lockdown. So welcome back, Sarah. Nice to have you, and of course our regular panelist Lorna as well. And today we're going to be talking about the return to work, and there's quite a lot of coverage in the press from various points of view, and I think we wanted to take as our topic today, now is not the time to frighten people back to the office. Discuss. Are we seeing that happening? If we're seeing that happening, should we be doing it? Is it time to start giving people a kick up the backside to get back to the office? Have people had 6 months of lounging around at work and dossing about in the sunshine, and it's time they got back to work? Or alternatively, what else? What have we been seeing? Have we been seeing improved productivity, improved work-life balance? Going on. So yes, I think it's fair to say that our policymakers are certainly making big efforts to encourage people to return, to get back to work, which kind of implies that they haven't been doing anything for the last 6 months, I fear. But and I know from Lorna's face she's got something to say about this. So go on, Lorna, you kick it off.
Oh, I don't even know where to begin with this. I have such a rant in me about it. I've got a feed. So I think there's a couple of things. There's the broader policymaker piece around the economic recovery, and which quick levers might we be able to pull to resurrect certain parts of our economy, and how do we do that versus potentially the longer term view of if the world of work is evolving and has evolved very quickly, and the future of cities and offices look very different. What does that mean about the economy that springs up around them and supports them? So there's that piece, which is a whole other section, I think. Like 4 more hours of ranting.
That's another Hive rant, yes.
So there's that. And then there's the fear, frightening people back to work. I saw somebody say the other day, what have I been doing from my kitchen table for the past 6 months if it's not work? Whilst I'm also homeschooling / babysitting / fighting with my other half about who gets which bit of the kitchen table / trying to wrestle the broadband back from the neighbourhood teenagers who've been on it 24/7 for all of lockdown. I mean, what have people been doing?
Yes.
So I think the back to work narrative from the media is really, really unhelpful. I think motivating people through fear anyway, that Telegraph headline of back to work or you'll lose your jobs, just so irresponsible. So irresponsible. Whether or not you've worked from home or had to work from home, or it's not the reason why you may or may not be losing your job as a result of all the changes as part of COVID and the pandemic. But people are exhausted. People have got fatigue around this, as we've talked about in previous episodes. Why would you ever want to use fear as a motivator to get them back into work anyway? It's a crap motivator. It doesn't really work. It's a very, it's a very crude lever to pull if you want to get anyone to do anything. And as you say, back to work's a misnomer. So no.
Marks out of 10 on this, 0. Nil point. Sarah,
let's try harder.
It smacks, doesn't it, of a fairly old-fashioned point of view that you have to be present to prove your worth. How does that chime with some of the organisations where you get involved?
I find this really interesting, that the media industry, from a press point of view, is still sort of using really old school headlines. I mean, most of the businesses I work with are working, well, all the businesses I've worked with are working successfully remotely. They're performing more highly than perhaps they were when they were in the office. They measure it through really clever tools, so surveys and that sort of thing. But also they're now beginning to ask their employees what they want and how they want to work, and reforming that in a way that works for everyone, bearing in mind that COVID hasn't gone away. So we've got to, on the one hand, we've got them saying, get back to work. And to Lorna's point, well, we were already working. So what do you mean by get back to work? But also, on the other hand, you're telling us that COVID hasn't got better and it hasn't gone away. You're not giving us any directive news about what the state of play with COVID is. So how can we make an informed decision as a business about how we do safely get back to work? And as HR professionals, we know that our duty of care is to be safe, not just from a kind of physical way, but from a well-being point of view, from a whole well-being point of view. So we can't just expect people to go back to work unless we're assessing what that looks like and what that bigger picture looks like and how we do it. But also, I think we're diminishing where we've moved to in this whole thing, in this whole last 6 months. Is we've really moved to a place where we can see that remote working is working successfully, but also we're demonstrating that local economies are being supported more because people are buying more locally. So what are we saying? Well, some of the bigger chains have got to taking an impact. Well, maybe they were taking an impact anyway. Then maybe there's a point at which we have to say, oh, I can't address the bigger cultural business picture, but I can look at my local business picture, and my local business picture I'm happy to support.
So there's a sense of rebalancing more broadly, isn't there? Not just rebalancing in terms of the extent to which people work in a workplace or a home workplace or where that workplace might be, but equally a sense of rebalancing the relationship between city centres and outlying commuter areas and more rural locations and the infrastructures around those, and commercial property versus housing stock. And it's a big picture. And it seems to me that a lot of these messages are very much about the sort of short term. We need to just keep our city centres functioning in terms of the hospitality industry and the coffee shops and the sandwich bars and all the rest of it, which of course we've got to think about that, but that's not the be all and end all of the whole thing, is it, by any means? So what would you say, Lorna, how would somebody, because I'm sure these slightly old-fashioned attitudes are prevalent in certain quarters, and therefore in a typical business environment there's going to be people who hold with that view that actually for the last 6 months people have just been dossing or working from home. How can HR people particularly kind of try and rebalance those perceptions? What tools could they call on?
Well, I think so. Actually, I'm with Sarah. All the clients that I'm working with are not going, oh, Boris says we should go back to the office, so we'll drag everybody back to the office. Most of them are trying to balance they're very practical. I've got X thousand square feet of office space and this many thousand employees, and what's the equation to keep a 2 metre distance, and how do we make that fair? That's what most employers are trying to do at the moment. And also asking people, hey, do you want to come back? Because the problem for a lot of employees isn't necessarily being in that office space. People are missing social contact, but it's I've got to get on a tube to get there, and I don't want to have to do that, or I've got to get on a train or whatever else. So I think the first thing is equip yourself with some facts. What are other organizations doing? What's the demographic of your employee population? What are the practical things that you have to adhere to from a health and safety point of view? So I was talking to an MD of an organization the other day, and actually it wasn't a fuddy-duddy kind of old-fashioned person who was pushing the agenda. It was quite a young but fairly senior, very dynamic, very well thought of employee, was really saying, look, me and my team really want to come back to the office. It doesn't seem fair that we can't, and we've got this rota system. And so the MD was saying, oh, Lorna, are we thinking about this wrong? And we thought through it in a very logical sequence. And the maths said we couldn't fit any more people into the office. The only way to make it fair was to have a system where you rotated, and to make sure that and there are practical terms like you don't want a COVID outbreak in your organisation.
You really don't.
You want to shut down operations or isolate people. So practically, you have to adhere to social distancing. Then you've got people who are shielding, people who are in, you know, very vulnerable situations or looking after very vulnerable people at home. I think there are, my husband works for a charity and all of the board are old lawyers, old retired lawyers. And the last time they were in an office was probably 1972. And they are all convinced that if they're not, you know, in the office, plus it's law, so, you know, you measure and bill by people's time. So it's just presenteeism central. They're all convinced that if they're all at home and you can't see them, they're all, you know, slacking. So they have to be in the office as quickly as possible. And they surveyed the organisation and 95% of the staff said, no, we're good and we think we're more productive. Thank you. And I was talking to a divisional director of a global business the other day from his home in Florence, with the background behind him and his little boy running in and out of the scene, playing in the garden. And his PA had said to me, I think it's really great that the employees are getting to see, you know, really senior people in real life, and we don't want to lose that. But he said to me, do you know what, Lorna, we've done the maths and people have been more productive over the past 5 months across all job types in this really diverse organisation, and I'm good with it. I'm good with how we are.
And
so
that's the end.
Do that. Do the maths. Prove, you know, actually logistically we can do these things. Productivity wise, output wise, whatever it is you're using, by the logic is going to tell you that we're not suffering from working, you know, in a more flexible way.
Excellent. Sarah, anything to add to that before we close this session?
I think to add to that is that as the furlough scheme starts to unfold more and more, we need to be addressing or looking at where there's how we're operating as businesses, and how actually the people who are, if office workers are more productive working in this way, then the economy may well not have been reliant on those office workers, but those people who were in more manual jobs. And actually, if those are the ones, if those are the ones who haven't been able to work because of the furlough scheme and because businesses have had to shut down, then actually how do we support those businesses to survive and thrive, and those individuals to survive and thrive in a world that may well have changed? So actually, to me, this piece needs so much more understanding than just one. It's not just about office workers. It is, you know, office workers clearly have been really productive. The data is showing that, it's shouting that, in fact, really loudly. So there's more to it than that in terms of the economy. If you ask me, you know, they're saying that the economy and also, you know, if the only source that's coming out is the media telling us that the economy is flatlined, I want more evidence. I don't just believe it. Sorry.
Excellent. Lovely. All right. Well, Lorna, Sarah, thank you very much. The key thing is evidence. Look for it, find more. The proof is definitely there. We are more productive, and fear is not a good tool to use in any event. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.